The desert does not bargain. It is a land of 120-degree heat of rock and shadow, where water is not a resource, it's a miracle. For thousands of years, Native American peoples have called this place home. They didn't survive here by luck. They survived by reading a hidden language, a language written in the flight of a bird, the leaf of a plant, and the cool face of stone. This is the story of the ultimate survival knowledge, how to find clean water in the middle of the desert. Part 1. The Parchment Landscape. This is the American Southwest, a land of brutal beauty and profound emptiness. To the modern eye, it is a landscape of scarcity, a parchment dried and cracked by a relentless sun. The numbers are staggering. In the heart of the Sonoran or Mojave, summer temperatures can soar past 120 degrees Fahrenheit, 50 Bowash, circle text, Sikh. It may not rain for 6 months. When it does, it is a violent, sudden deluge that disappears as quickly as it came. For a human survival here is measured in hours. Without water, the body quickly succumbs. Dehydration leads to confusion, then organ failure, then death. It is by all measures one of the most hostile environments on Earth. And yet, it is not empty. It is not a wasteland. It is a home. For over 10,000 years, this land has been inhabited, navigated, and understood by people. The ancestral Puebloans, the Hohokam, the Patayan, the Hopi, the Zuni, the Navajo Diné, the Apache, and the Tohono O'odham, the Akimel O'odham, Pima, the Paiute, the Shoshone. These are not the ghosts of a vanished people. They are the ancestors and the continuing generations of cultures who mastered a science that we are only beginning to relearn. A science of observation, of patience, and of profound respect. How did they do it? How do you find life-giving water in a land that seems defined by its absence? When you first look at the American Southwest, your first thought is barren. Your first thought is impossible. It's a natural reaction. But that's a modern perspective, an outsider's perspective. For the people who have lived here for millennia, this isn't an empty space. It's a library. Every plant, every animal track, every contour of the rock is a sentence in a story that tells you exactly where the water is. You just have to know how to read. My ancestors, my grandmothers, they didn't survive the desert. That word survive implies they were fighting it. They lived with it. They were part of it. The desert wasn't an enemy. It was a teacher. A very strict teacher, but a teacher. And water was the first lesson. The most important lesson. This is not a story of a single magic trick. It is a story of a system of knowledge. A deep, multi-layered understanding that combines geology, botany, zoology, and engineering. A knowledge system that can be broken down. It begins not with digging, but with looking. Part 2. The Living Language. Plant and Animal Indicators. To find water, the first rule is simple: follow life. The desert is full of living beings, and not a single one can exist without water. They are your guides. The most reliable yet most fleeting sign is animal behavior. You get up before the sun. You watch the doves, the quail. In the morning, they fly fast and low, and they fly in a straight line. They're thirsty. They are flying to their morning drink. You follow that line. In the evening, you see them again. They're full. They fly more scattered from perch to perch. But in the morning, that flight path is a map. It's an arrow pointing water this way. It's not just birds. The tracks of land animals are a vital clue. Deer, bighorn, sheep, coyotes, and rabbits all need to drink. While many get moisture from the plants they eat, they will visit a known water source. You'll find game trails. At first they are small and scattered, but as you follow them, especially as you follow them downhill or into a canyon, you'll see them converge. One small trail joins another and another. When you find what looks like a highway of tracks, all leading to the same place, you've found a critical resource. They are all going to the same convenience store. Even insects are guides. A swarm of bees, not just a few, but a concentration often means a hive. And a hive, particularly one in a rock crevice, is rarely far from a reliable if small seep or spring. But by far the most reliable indicators are the ones that can't move. The ones that are locked in to their water source, the plants. These are the phreatophytes, a scientific name for plants with extraordinarily deep root systems that tap directly into the water table or subterranean streams. They are quite literally living wells. The king of all indicators is the Fremont cottonwood, Populus fremontii. The cottonwood is the river's beacon. Its roots must touch permanent saturated soil. It cannot survive otherwise. If you are in a dry, sandy wash, a place that looks like it hasn't seen water in a year, and you see a line of healthy green cottonwoods, you are looking at a map of a subterranean river. The water is right there, just feet below your own. The same is true for its close companions, willow trees, Salix stolaz, and seep willow, Baccharis salicifolia. A dense, bright green thicket of these plants, in an otherwise dry landscape, is a neon sign flashing water in a language the desert's people have read for 10,000 years. Other trees tell a more subtle story. The mesquite prosopis is a survivor. Its taproot can drill down over 150 feet. While its presence means water is in the region, a particularly large, lush specimen, or a dense bosque or forest of them, indicates that water is much closer to the surface. And then there are the plants that signal water right at the surface. In canyons, look for cattails, typha and arrowweed, Pluchea sericea. These are not desert plants. They are wetland plants. If you find them in the desert, you have found a spring, a seep, or a permanently damp area. It's a form of botanical forensics. The indigenous people of this area were the world's first and best botanists. They had to be. A single healthy cottonwood in a seemingly dry canyon is a shout. It's screaming water. A patch of damp-loving moss on a rock face is a whisper. You have to learn to listen to both. Part 3. The Stone and the Shadow. Geological Indicators. But what happens when there are no plants, no animals? What happens when you are in the empty quarter, the vast stretches of pure rock and gravel? This is when you must read the land itself. You must read geology and topography. Water moves in predictable ways. It flows downhill. It soaks into porous rock. It stops at non-porous rock. This junction is the key. Look for the contact zone. This is where a porous rock layer like sandstone sits on top of a non-porous layer like shale or granite. Rain and snow land on the mesa, soak into the sandstone like a giant sponge. And then they hit the shale. The water can't go down, so it moves sideways. Eventually it hits the edge of a canyon, and it leaks out. This is a seep or a spring. It may be nothing more than a damp stain on the rock, but it is the desert's most precious resource. It is water that is being naturally filtered by the sandstone, and it flows slowly but steadily all year long. The ancestors of the Hopi, the ancestral Puebloans, didn't just look for these. They built their civilizations around them. Look for the visual clues. Dark streaks on the rock called desert varnish show where water has flowed in the past. But look below that. Look for white, chalky mineral deposits, efflorescence, or even better, a patch of bright green moss or delicate ferns. These living indicators clinging to a sheer rock face are a guarantee of water. Beyond the rock itself, you read the shape of the land. This is a dry wash. It looks like the driest place on Earth. But it is in fact a hidden reservoir. The water is here. It's just sleeping. You have to know where to dig. You don't dig in the middle. You go to a corner. You go to the outside bend of the wash. It's a basic principle of fluid dynamics. When a flash flood rips through this wash, the water moves fastest on the outside of a bend, just like a race car. This high-speed water scours a deep channel in the sand and bedrock. When the flood subsides, this deep channel is the last place to hold water. And that water soaks straight down into the sand. The surface sand dries out, acting as a natural lid, protecting the water below from evaporation. The outside bend of an arroyo is a natural underground storage tank. The sand is a living filter, and the indigenous people knew exactly where and how to tap it. Finally, you use the simplest indicator of all the shadow. In the northern hemisphere, south-facing slopes get the direct, brutal all-day sun. They are hot and dry, but north-facing slopes live in shadow. Evaporation is slow. At higher elevations, snow can last here for months, melting slowly, recharging the soil. If you are in a canyon, the north-facing wall is the one to inspect. It will be cooler. It will hold more moisture. It is the most likely place to find a seep, a spring, or a cluster of water-indicating plants. You walk into a canyon. You stop. You feel the air. Does it get cooler? You smell. Can you smell damp earth? Can you smell that willow or cottonwood? You listen. Can you hear a bee, a frog? You look at the rock. The rock tells you where the water wants to go. You don't find water. You intercept it. Part 4. Tapping the source, wells, seeps, and tenajas. Once the location is identified, the work of extraction begins. This is where knowledge becomes survival. The most common and most important technique was the arroyo well, or sand wick. The digger moves past the dry surface layer. They find the cool, damp sand. They continue to dig. At a depth of 3, 4, maybe 5 feet, a small magical thing happens. This is water. But it's not clean water. It's a muddy, silty slurry. Drinking this will at best make you sick. The sand needs to be filtered out. The simplest way is to let the hole fill, then skim the clearer water from the very top. But a more advanced technique used by Apache and other groups was to create a filter well. It's an incredibly clever 2-stage process. You dig your first hole, the access hole, until you hit the water. It fills with mud. Then you dig a second, shallower hole, just a foot or two away. Because the sand is saturated, the water will seep laterally from the deep hole to the shallow one. The sand between the 2 holes acts as a massive filter. The water that pools in the second hole will be dramatically cleaner. Another method was to line the hole. The digger would create a small caisson of rocks and pack grass reeds or juniper bark on the outside of the rocks. This bundle of vegetation would act as a pre-filter, allowing clearer water to seep into the central rock-lined basin. Seep water, on the other hand, is almost perfectly clean. But the challenge here isn't quality, it's quantity. A seep might produce only 1 drop every 10 seconds. This is a game of patience. A tuft of dry grass or moss could be pressed to the rock to absorb the water, then squeezed into a container. A hollow reed could be inserted into a crevice with a small stone wedged to hold it in place to act as a spigot, funneling the drips. Small grooves would be carved into the rock with a harder stone to channel multiple drips into a single collectible stream. This is water harvesting at its most minimal and most patient. And then there are nature's own cisterns. The Spanish called them tinajas tinajas, or earthen jars. These are depressions in bedrock, often at the base of a dry waterfall, scoured out by eons of flash floods, tumbling stones and gravel. They are the desert's savings account. A tinaja is a critical known resource. A large, deep one might hold thousands of gallons of water and last for months. An experienced traveler, an Apache scout, a Diné trader, a Paiute family would have a precise mental map of every major tinaja in their territory. Their lives depended on it. But tinajas are a paradox. They are a life-saving source of water, but they are also incredibly dangerous. That water looks good. But what's in it? An animal fell in and drowned. Birds have been using it for months. It's full of bacteria, algae, and parasites. It's a living water, and not in a good way. You drink from that tinaja without thinking you're dead in 3 days. We call that beaver fever, giardia. Or worse, the water from a tinaja is almost never clean. It is a source that must be processed. Part 5. Making it safe. The ancient art of purification. Finding water is half the battle. The other half is surviving the water you found. A stagnant tinaja, a muddy arroyo, well, all of them carry invisible threats: giardia, dysentery, cholera. The indigenous peoples of the Southwest knew this, and they had a solution that was and still is the gold standard of water purification heat. But how do you boil water in a container that burns? You can't put a woven basket or a skin bag on a fire. So you put the fire in the water. This is hot rock boiling. The process is ingenious. Rocks, non-porous ones like basalt or granite, never sandstone or river rocks, which can trap moisture and explode, are heated in a fire for 30-45 minutes until glowing. They are then lifted with wooden tongs and carefully placed into the water-filled basket or pottery vessel. The transfer of heat is immediate and violent. The water around the rock flashes to steam. It's incredibly efficient. You cycle the rocks. You put one in it, sizzles, you stir it until it cools. You take it out, put it back in the fire. You put the next hot rock in. Within minutes, you can bring a full basket of water to a rolling boil. Hold it there for just a few minutes, and you have sterilized perfectly safe drinking water. It might taste a little ashy, but it will save your life. But boiling takes time and fire. What about a first pass? What about water that's just too muddy to drink? This is where filtration comes in. We saw the sand filter well, but a more portable method involves filtering through materials. Water could be poured through a dense bundle of grass, a piece of tightly woven cloth, or even buckskin to remove the large particulates, the silt and the insect larvae. There was also a form of chemical purification, or more accurately, flocculation. This is a fascinating bit of ethnobotany. There are accounts of various groups, including in Mexico, using the pulp of a prickly pear cactus. They'd peel it, mash it up, and stir it into a container of very muddy, turbid water. The cactus pulp is mucilaginous, it's slimy, and that slime bonds with the suspended particles, the silt and clay, making them heavier. Over the next hour, all that gunk clumps together and sinks to the bottom, leaving crystal clear, or at least clearer, water on top. This clear water would then be carefully decanted and to be safe boiled. And what about a last-ditch desperate measure? When there is no surface water, no plants, no arroyo to dig in, there is the solar still. The principles are ancient. Dig a pit in the ground, in a place that gets all-day sun. Place a container, a piece of pottery, a hollowed gourd in the dead center. Then you fill the pit around the container with anything that holds moisture. cut up cactus, damp leaves agave. In a true survival situation, even urine. You cover the pit with a piece of hide, a large leaf, or in modern times, plastic. You seal the edges with dirt. Finally, you place a small stone in the center of the cover, right over the container, to create a low point, a drip. The sun, that's your enemy, right? But now it's your tool. The sun heats the pit like a little greenhouse. The heat makes the water evaporate from the cactus, from the leaves, from the ground. But it can't escape. It rises, it hits the cool underside of the cover, and it condenses. The water that condenses is distilled. It is 100% pure. All the salt, all the bacteria, all the impurities are left behind. The clear, clean water runs down the sagging cover to that low point and drips, drip, drip, into your container. It's agonizingly slow. A well-made still might produce a single cup of water a day. But in the desert, 1 cup of pure water is the difference between life and death. Part 6. Catching the Sky. The engineering of rain. The desert has 2 water budgets. There is the ground budget, the water hidden in the earth, and there is the sky budget. The desert rain is a paradox. It is an all-or-nothing event. A single monsoon storm can drop half the entire year's rainfall in 20 minutes. Most of it floods the land and is gone. Unless you are prepared to catch it. The indigenous peoples of the Southwest, particularly the ancestral Puebloans, were masters of rainwater harvesting. They didn't just find water, they engineered its collection. When the ancestral Puebloans built a village like Cliff Palace, they weren't just thinking about defense. They were thinking about water. You look at the village, and it's built under this massive sloping rock face. That rock is a giant funnel. A single rainstorm would send thousands of gallons of water pouring over that cliff. They didn't let that go to waste. They were, in every sense of the word, water farmers. They enhanced the natural collection system. They carved small grooves and channels in the rock to direct the flow. They built low, meandering dams to guide the runoff. And they directed it all not to their houses, but to their cisterns. These were hand-dug, stone-lined, and plastered with a waterproof layer of clay. They were covered with stone lids to prevent evaporation and keep animals out. This was clean, fresh rainwater, stored inside their city, that could last them for months. On the mesa tops where they farmed, they used a different technique: check dams. These are simple, low rock walls built across a small arroyo. They weren't designed to stop the flood that's impossible. They were designed to slow it. The check dam is a brilliant multi-purpose tool. First, it slows the water down. This stops erosion. Second, it traps the silt, the richest topsoil. Over a few years, a series of check dams will turn a rocky, useless gully into a series of small, flat, fertile terraces. Third, and most important, it plants the water. Planting the water. By slowing the flood, the check dam gives the water time to sink, to soak deep into the soil. It recharges the local aquifer, raising the water table and creating a patch of land that will stay moist long after the rain is gone. It is in this reclaimed, water-rich soil that they would plant their 3 sisters, their corn, beans, and squash. They weren't just irrigating. They were building the farm itself, using only water gravity and stone. Part 7. Case Studies in Hydrology. This diverse toolkit plant indicators, geological clues, wells, seeps, and rainwater harvesting was not applied randomly. Different cultures in different environments specialized. They became masters of specific strategies, creating vast civilizations based on their unique relationship with water. Case Study 1. The Hohokam, the Great Canal Builders. In the blistering flat lowlands of the Sonoran Desert, near modern-day Phoenix, a civilization rose on a scale that is difficult to comprehend. These were the Huhugam, those who have gone, the ancestors of the Akimel or Odum. Between 450 and 1450 AD, they executed one of the most ambitious engineering projects in the pre-Columbian world. They decided they wouldn't just find water, they would move it. We are not talking about small irrigation ditches. We are talking about a canal system that laid end to end would stretch for over 700 miles. Some of the main canals were over 30 feet wide and 10 feet deep. They were dug by hand, using stone tools and woven baskets. The engineering is staggering. The gradient was perfect, dropping only 1 or 2 feet per mile. Modern engineers with lasers would find that challenging. They tamed the Salt and Gila rivers. They diverted nearly their entire flow and used it to turn the desert into a massive irrigated farm. This system supported a population of tens of thousands, with trade routes that stretched from the Pacific to the Great Plains. For drinking water, they didn't drink from the silty canals. They dug deep wells next to the canals, letting the earth filter the water. Their villages were built on a foundation of total water control. But this system, a strategy of maximum intervention, had a fatal flaw. It was rigid. When a regional mega-drought hit in the 1300s and 1400s, the river's flow diminished. A single flood at the wrong time could silt up the main intakes, a catastrophic event requiring thousands of man-hours to fix. By 1450, this great water-based civilization had vanished its cities, abandoned its canals, left to the silt and sun. Case Study 2. The ancestral Puebloans, masters of the seep, go north to the high, cold plateaus of the Four Corners. Here the ancestral Puebloans took the opposite approach. Not maximum intervention, but hyper-local adaptation. They built their stone cities in massive cliff alcoves, thousands of feet up. There are no rivers here, no canals. Their strategy was collection and conservation. They lived at the source. This wasn't an accident. They chose the location because of the water. The village was secondary. You look at Cliff Palace. It is built directly below the geological contact zone, that layer of sandstone sitting on shale. Their entire water supply came from 2 sources, the seeps that leaked from that contact zone, and the rain they collected from the slick rock above. You can still see the hand and toe trails pecked into the cliff face, leading to a small dark stain on the rock. That was the spring. They would carve a basin to collect the drips. The plaza of the village itself was a collection surface, funneling water into clay-lined cisterns, built directly into the ceremonial kivas. It was a life of meticulous daily water budgeting. Every drop was accounted for. This was a fragile system. It worked for hundreds of years, but it was entirely dependent on the local snowpack and rain. When the Great Drought hit in the late 1200s, a drought that lasted decades, the seeps dried up. The check dams on the mesa top failed, the corn died, and they too had to move. Case Study 3. The Tohono O'odham, Dancers of the Flood. Our third case study is perhaps the most resilient. The Tohono O'odham, the people of the desert who lived in the same harsh landscape as the Hohokam. Their strategy was not to control the water. It was to be flexible. It was to move with it. The O'odham practiced a 2-village system. It's brilliant. In the dry winter and spring, they lived in well villages up in the mountains near permanent springs and wells. But in the summer, when the monsoon rains were supposed to come, they did the opposite of what you'd expect. They moved down from the mountains out onto the hot, open desert. Why, they were practicing Akchin farming. Akchin is an O'odham word for mouth of the arroyo. They would build their small seasonal villages and plant their fields at the exact spot where a desert wash fans out onto the plain. When the monsoon storm hit the mountains, a sheet of water would flood down the wash and spread naturally over their fields. It was a flood they welcomed. This water wasn't just water. It was full of silt and nutrients from the mountains. It was free irrigation and free fertilizer delivered to their doorstep. For drinking water, they would dig shallow wells in the now wet wash or create man-made ponds called charcos to capture the runoff. This system is brilliant. It's flexible. If the storm failed in this valley, they would move to a family village in the next valley where the storm hit. They didn't fight the desert. They danced with its rhythms. They spread their risk. They listened to the land and the sky, and they responded. This is resilience. Part 8. The Soul of Water. A Sacred Covenant. This is the part that modern survival manuals miss, the most important part. For the indigenous peoples of the Southwest, finding water was not just a technical problem, it was a spiritual covenant. We are taught from the time we are born that water is sacred. Water is life. It is a relative. It's a living being. You don't take water. You ask for it. You give thanks for it. Before you drink, you offer a prayer. You leave a small offering. You never waste it. You never ever foul a source. That's not just bad manners. It's a sacrilege. It's breaking a sacred relationship with the land that sustains you. This respect was encoded in ceremony, in song, in prayer. The Hopi snake antelope ceremony, the Zuni prayers for rain, the Diné songs for the blessing of a spring. These are not superstitions. They are complex, powerful cultural mechanisms for community-wide water conservation. They are ways of remembering the rules of survival. When your entire cosmology revolves around the sacredness of water, conservation isn't a policy you debate. It's just how you live. Every action is weighed against its impact on this sacred, limited resource. It's a worldview that we in the modern, thirsty Southwest have desperately failed to adopt. Part 9. Lessons for a Thirsty World. Today, the American Southwest is in a mega-drought, the worst in 200 years, amplified by a changing climate. The great rivers, the Hohokam, tamed the Colorado. The Gila, the Salt, are drying up. The aquifers are being pumped faster than they can recharge. We built a modern Hohokam system, a massive, complex, rigid infrastructure of canals and dams and pipelines. And just like the Hohokam, we are discovering how vulnerable that system is. The knowledge is not lost. It is simply waiting. What can we learn from the ancestral Puebloans? The value of hyper-local collection, rainwater harvesting, grey water systems, treating every roof as a collection surface, every drop as precious. What can we learn from the Tohono O'odham? The value of flexibility, of planting the water, of building check dams and swales in our cities to recharge our local aquifers rather than sending precious storm water rushing down concrete drains to the sea. This isn't ancient history. It's a playbook for a sustainable future. The Hohokam model of maximum control is failing. The Puebloan model of living on the fragile edge is a warning. It's the O'odham model, the model of flexibility, respect, and living within the land's budget that holds the most promise. The old knowledge is not old, it's timeless. My ancestors knew you don't build a city where there is no water. They knew that you must live within the water budget of the land. We are having to relearn this lesson. The hard way. The land is still here. The plants are still here. They are still talking. The question is, Are we finally ready to listen? From the flight of a dove at dusk to the shadow on a canyon wall, from the glint of a cottonwood leaf to the sizzle of a hot rock in a woven basket. The story of water in the desert is a story of human ingenuity. It's a story of resilience, and it's a story of profound respect. A body of knowledge passed down for 100 generations that turned the most hostile of landscapes into a home. The wisdom of the desert is a story of resilience, observation, and respect. This indigenous knowledge carried for generations is more than just history. It's a vital lesson for our own thirsty world. If you were fascinated by this journey into survival science, please show your support by liking this video and sharing it with someone who needs to see it. Subscribe to our channel and click the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the incredible wisdom of the past. And let us know in the comments what other ancient survival knowledge should we explore next. Thank you for watching.